Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Dalibor Stojaković. I'm from Web Solutions Agency and I'm a lead developer and architect there. So I'm in business for over 10 years and I've been working on big and medium projects there for some time now. And I've also noticed that there's a lack of documentation for Drupal 8 when I was building it, so I've also started writing some blogs about it. You can also ping me on LinkedIn or Twitter about it and stuff like that. Today we'll talk about Search API, Facets, and Search API Solr, and how to implement also custom processors for those modules. So what is Search API? Basically, Search API is easy way. It provides you an easy way to implement complex searches for your website. It also is very powerful with combination with Search API Solr and Facets. So installation is pretty simple. You will just require the needed module with Composer and it will be downloaded for your project. It contains like 4 kinds of modules: database search defaults, Search API, and views taxonomy handler. Basically, these first 2 you will not use. I mean, if you are implementing Search API, you will most likely use the Search API Solr. So we'll cover it in this session. With Search API Solr Search, it gives you an ability to connect with Apache Solr and gives you indexing there and searches. So Search API Solr gives you that ability, and the defaults is just a default setting you will get, but you don't really need it. You can configure it even without this. If you enable it, just uninstall it afterwards because configuration will remain in your database. So how is that done? So first of all, you'll need to install and configure your Apache Solr to have the ability to work with it. Search API Solr module has like a config folder for your Apache, which you can copy and then configure it with the schema provided. If you are working in development and for local purposes, you can use like Docker for Drupal, which comes with the config schema when you create the core. So it will also like configure the core for version of Drupal you are using. Also, one other module that you'll use if you are using, if you are having like a multilingual site is the Search API multilingual Solr Search. This is kind of a separation from the Search API Solr, which they want to separate all that is multilingual in this module so that they have a much cleaner code. And it provides better support for non-English languages and language-specific problems. Other modules you'll also use is Facets. So does anyone work with Search API or Facets here? Yeah. Nice. So for those of you who don't know it, it's kind of like a search sidebar, which you can see on the websites for like category or type of process or something. So it provides a easy UI components view that come basically out of the box, and you can create your own custom facets based on the fields that are indexed. So what are the basic steps? How you will use it? You'll create and configure the search server. Then you'll create index, add some fields in it. You'll do initial indexing and create a view based on that index. You'll create and configure facets for that particular view. And then you'll set it up somewhere in the block layout, and if needed, and you'll need it probably, sometime to create your own custom processors, facets, widgets, whatever. So those are the steps for general usage you will most likely go through. So the database server that comes out of the box with the Search API Solr, it's kind of like a basic database server for indexing, but it's not recommended for larger sites. So it basically indexes all the data inside the database other than, for example, the Solr. And Search API Solr is providing the ability to interact with Apache Solr, which is kind of like a blazing fast open source enterprise search platform that is using, Netflix is using it, Disney, eBay, like most of the big sites use it because of its stability. And from my experience, Search API Solr is kind of like most mature module for Drupal 8, I mean, search regarding. There's also like Elasticsearch, but this one is, from my experience, much more stable. So how do you do it? So first one, you need to configure the Solr Server. So you are going to the admin interface, you are configuring the server after you have configured the Solr, and you are entering like name of the server, driver, and data sources, like what exactly you want, path, core. So I would like to note here one thing. This server configuration, this is not server. I mean like Apache server. You can take a look at this as a core inside the Search API server. So Apache Solr has like multiple cores. Each of the configuration inside the Search API that is named server, it's actually a link to the core. So for example, if you are like creating indexes that need to have like a different kind of search priority. So when you are creating fields inside your nodes, you can reuse those fields. So for example, your node user, something field user, can be also used on multiple bundles. But for example, for one bundle, it will have like a higher priority and this will boost up. You can set this in your index. You can boost up full text search on a certain level. But for example, for some other, you need to set up boost on a different level. So basically you will create two servers, but those will be actually cores with different kind of boost levels. So don't think of it as a server, but as a core inside. Okay, so during this configuration, you can also set up settings to determine Solr version. You can set up to handle it automatically, or you can select it based on your Solr version, and you can check this multi-site compatibility to receive the results for this site only. This is recommended because this will give you the index results for only your domain. So if you have like multiple domains, multiple indexes, this is the way. Also, I would like to note that I mean, Search API will not stop you for making many indexes per server. It will not stop you, it will let you. But this is not a recommended practice, so basically use one index per server, one index. So it will throw you like info message in a status report, but this is a bad practice and it has some issues with, for example, autocompletes and some similar widgets. So if you do it like one server, one index, this will be resolved. So what's a Search API index? This is basically the data that you will index inside the Search server. You have the option to create on the admin configuration page, and you can select multiple data sources in one index. So basically, you can, in one index, you can index all your bundles or your fields and set up different kind of indexing for each of those fields. But if you need to create like different prioritized, then you'll need to create multiple indexes. In any case, you will definitely create it. So just keep in mind for the priority of the index fields. So this is how it looks like to create some index. So you need to choose a name, data source, the server you will index it, and basically to enable it. You can also select the option to index items immediately, or it will be done with the cron afterward. Search index, if you select the index items immediately, it will give you like a slowdown for larger sites, so it's recommended to have it like invalidated and then index it with cron, I don't know, every some time. And this is for setting the batch size, which will trigger inside the cron. Configuring data sources, so this is something we just spoke. So you can define the inside of each data source, there's sub settings where you can define which language you want to index, which data sources and stuff related only to this data source. The data types you can index is integer, decimal, string, date, full text, and boolean. So basically, all fields that you will be using for search, you should define them as a full text. Then you'll have the ability on each of the view to define how you want to parse that search, or how do you want to set up the boost inside the index. But so for search, you should define the full text other than the string. Adding fields. Adding fields is pretty simple. Basically, you will go to the fields tab and just add the fields you need to your searches. Then you'll define which of the field data type will it be, and it will be indexed pretty easy. So other than normal fields, there's also rendered HTML output, which is great if you want to like index complete rendered output and then just display it as a rendered view on a view. So this will speed up the loading time. But if you want to do something like a field level, you can do that also. So basically, with rendered HTML output, you will get complete view rendered, but it will only be like one view. So you'll need to, if you are using like view with multiple layouts, and you'll need to index each of them. Okay, we also have a URI and the aggregated field. Aggregated field is kind of like when you want multiple fields to be bundled in one. For example, if you want to concatenate multiple fields together, then you will select concatenation on the aggregation type, and then which fields values you want to concatenate, and then you will get those fields indexed like that. Okay, so this is an example. When you add it, you can also, one thing I forgot to mention, so you can also like do a full text search on the rendered output. So for example, if you only want to search what is on the page, you can do that. Okay, other thing is related to the view tab. View is only gives you the ability to clear all index and to clear and to re-index them manually. You'll most likely use it in development, but other than that, no. So we've got to the processors. So each index item when it's indexed, you can either create your own processors or use existing ones. So processors are used in like pre or post-process data and at search time. So bundles are multiple. You'll most likely use the pretty much any listed here except maybe highlight. What I would recommend is the transliteration, because if you are like on an international site which has like name like Miller or something with the special characters, it will not work if you enter U inside. So you'll probably use it in many cases. You can also define for each of the processor in which order it will execute. So you can pretty much lift out the weights of each processor, and okay, so you'll show him this will be done first, then this, and then it's pretty easy. Each of the processor has also its own settings. So you can take a look at this below. So for example, for HTML filter, you can select which field you want to use for if you have multiple fields for that. And then on which tag based, you can also, when you are creating your own custom processor, do same thing. And pretty easy, I'll show that later. So after you selected some search fields, you need to create the search index-based view. So inside the view, you can create show me this index. So in this case, it's like index content, and create a page that will show this index. And then you can use like rendered entity to show rendered entity, and it will display the rendered entity we just indexed. Also, I would like to note here that if you were using full text search for this and noted some of the boost levels, then you need to place here sorting by relevance, because it will then be sorted by the relevance you specified. You can also alter this boost if you want, but altering is probably the last thing you will want to do if you can do it in any other way. Okay, so for full text search fields, Vue gives you an option to select on which fields you want to search. So maybe you have selected 10 fields, but for this particular view, you want to search only 2. So you can do that in the settings on a view. You can select each of the fields you want to search with. By default, it will search on everyone. But you want to select like 2 fields, for example, title and description, and that's it. And you can also select the parse mode, which gives you the ability to check how the search will behave. So whether it will consider this search like a multiple word search, or like a direct query, or kind of like a single phrase to match the data. And view result can be for this something like this. So our front-end team will deal with this, so it will look better. Then, okay. So for this is kind of a result. We have like a full text search go up in the filtering, and you can apply it and search it for this generated data. Okay, so we are not happy with this view, so we need to add some facets in it. Basically, when you go to the facets configuration, you need to select option to add facet, and you can also see listed the facet source. Facet source is basically your view page, view index page. So if you have like multiple views that are using your index, you'll have it listed here. And when you add facet, you can select it in the facet source. You can select which field will be used for this facet, and you can name it whatever you want. Also, there are settings for each facet. So facet, like Search API, has also its own processors, and you can also create new ones. Some of the listed, these one listed here are the default ones you get with the latest version. When we started with the Drupal 8 with the project, like maybe a few months ago, only about 3 of the widgets were here. So it's moving really fast, and they are adding the new widgets every month, 2 months or so. So basically, this is a widget how your facet will look like. You can select a list of links, drop-down list, and these settings below, this basically depends on the widget selected. So which of the widgets you selected, it will drop down also settings which you can modify additionally, and that's it. You can also select on the facet settings which of the facet processors you would like to use on your facet, and basically this is like a checklist where when you select additional processor, it will be listed below, and you can see the settings for each facet. For example, this one is for sorting, where you can set the additional settings for each facet. And then you have also the processor order similar to the Search API ordering processor. So you can also do ordering of facet processor same way as on the Search API processor. And also we have these stages, which is when this will be triggered. Then after creating the facet processor and the facet, you will need to place this facet inside the block to be listed on a page. So you'll do that on the block layout. You'll select this facet you just created, and then you'll place it on currently index view. And it will be shown here. So now you have your facet, you have the counts for each of the tag that is indexed and how much of the counts are related to it. So kind of when you are using with facets, you get a requirement for a client that needs to be done some custom processor that's not supported. So this is something you will most likely get in some project. So how to do it? So for Search API, you basically need to create a processor class in your module /source/plugin/Search API processor, and class needs to extend the processor plugin base. And if you want those configuration forms, you'll need to implement plugin form interface. So what's the annotation? You need to list the label, the ID, the description, and the stages. So stages available are defined as like a stage underscore constants in the processor interface, so you can see all the stages listed there. Okay, so this is an example of the annotation example where you can set the ID, the label, and stages for example for pre-index save, pre-process index, and post-process query. So I'll now show one of the processor, for example, for ignoring case. So this is kind of like a Search API processor that will ignore all cases in the search. And here we have like a class ignore case with process field protected function, which basically gets the field on a processing level and then sets it as a lowercase, and on the process function we'll simply index this field as a lowercase, and that's it. So you implemented like 2 functions and got a processor for you. So another thing more complex is what we did for this last project is, did any of you work with flag module? Flag, yeah. In Drupal 8 or Drupal 7? Okay. So flag module in Drupal 8 didn't have the ability to index flags. I mean, flag is right now an entity, separate entity, and not kind of like a field for your node. So, for example, if you want to index all flags or users that flag this content, you cannot do it without this module currently in Drupal 8. So, can we talk about it? And I made this model. You can download it from Facets Search API. I'll show a bit of code in it. So just a minute. So this is kind of how it looks like, the processor for flag. And what it gives you an ability for each index. You will get like a configuration form. And you can select each of the flag that is listed, and you can say, okay, I want to index, I don't know, flag bookmark on this index. And then you can use it in your view and say, I want all content I just bookmarked. And you can create a view based on that flag. So this is kind of what it looks like. So basically what we did here is we extended the processor plugin base, like we said. We also implemented the plugin form interface and container factory plugin interface. This is for configuration form and for dependency injection. So we have dependency here for flag service. We have a constructor which then pushes that inside the variable, protected variable. Then we have default configuration for flag index, and then we have like build configuration form. This is our form which will build up, and when you check it, it will then use the flag index processor on index. We also have a validation and submission of this form. So basically submitting form to be saved. What else? We have a field definition class which will generate all the flags we have in our system, and it will return them inside the form so that we see all the flags that are there that we created, and we can check them on the form below. And inside the preprocess index items, what we did is basically when the item is getting indexed, so we are fetching the flag for that item, and then we are indexing it. And then in the pre-index save, we are telling the search API that this field exists because, in fact, this is a custom field. We don't have it in the system. We don't have it anywhere. So it's like a processor property. As you can see above, just a minute. See here, kind of like properties, new processor property. You'll not see this also on Drupal.org because there is kind of an old documentation. They were using data definition or something for this. So right now the latest one is the processor property. So you will use the processor property for your new custom property, and then it will be saved. Kind of like whenever you want to have like a field on the index that doesn't really exist, but you need to index it for some of your custom searches, you'll do something similar to this. And since we did it like this, what we got is kind of like this. So we have our flag indexing here settings. We can select all the flags and enable it on the index, and then we can use, I don't know, contextual filter in a view to say, give me all the bookmarked items where I bookmarked it. I mean, from the logged in user, you'll get this. Also, we created also another module. Currently, it's not publicly available, but it will be available in like a week or two. I need to just publish it. This is entity BackReference. It uses similar technique, but we had like a request to get index fields for the entities that have entity reference fields on another entity. So basically, what you would do without this is to create another entity reference and then just pre-save it, and that's just a lot of work and not really good. So what we did is basically created a processor that will pull all the entity reference that are on other entities, and then it will show us here on this form, and then we will select them. And if we need to get, for example, you want to see if the user was on an event some sort, and in event entity you have a list of users, but you don't have entity reference from a user to that entity, and you cannot think of Search API server to be like a relational database. It's basically like a document. So what you need some sort of field on that entity to give you that ability, and this is what it does. So basically it gives you an ability to have this custom field, which will give you all the references where that entity is referenced, and then it will give you the ability to select, I don't know, user was on that event or wasn't. You will not have to create some sort of pre-saves or separate fields or something. Okay, now we are getting to the post-processing query processor. So post-process query needs to be set in the annotation for this, and you also need to implement post-process search results to get the post-processing query processor working. Example for this, you can take a look at the highlight processor for this. I'll not get into deep because we are short on time, so I cannot show pretty much everything. But this highlight processor is available at the Search API level, so you can take a look at it. And we've reached the custom facet processors, and custom facet processor can also be built like a pre-query processor, post-query processor, build processor, and sort processor. So pretty much similar to the Search API processor, but this will be used on a facet level. So you will process the facets the same way. So how does this look like? I built this example for excluding non-parent terms. So you will show only terms that are not parents. So you will load all parents and show only the top level parents. So on build mode, this will load parent, check if that item is the first one, and then just unset other, and you will get only the top level ones. Okay, for the other things you will also maybe require when you're working with the Search API is maybe you'll have to tweak your query for some reason to get the stuff working. So what you can do is you can do this in hook Search API query alter, where you can alter the query that is going to the server. It's similar what it was like in Drupal 7, but this is kind of like a last option if you cannot do it any other way. You can also like implement tag and then do the alteration inside the Search API query tag alter. And for example, this will check if the node ID is different than 10. And you can also do it on a Search API Solr level. So when you are using the Search API Solr, you also have a separate alters for this, and you can either clear some sorts or something you want to do with your query. Also, same applies for results. So you can also alter the results you are getting. So this can be also done on when you get the results, you can customize them or modify them accordingly. And this is pretty much it for me. So do you have any questions or something? Okay.
Have you tried comparing the speed from like Solr Server and the DB server on let's say a smaller
on smaller level
base?
You will not notice this as on kind of like a large set of data. So for a small website that don't have many requests, it's okay, but for larger one, when you have a bunch of data that needs to get requested, you have also the ability here to fetch items directly from Solr, so it will not request any kind of query to your database. It will fetch the items directly from Solr, and that will reduce the load you have back to the search server. So you'll see the impact as much. So when the site grows, you'll notice performance difference higher and higher. So, and also I would like to note that the same, I mean, for example, you want to use the database server, and you can use the database server, and I don't know, in 1 year you decide you want to go with Solr. It's actually an easy switch. So it's not something you'll need to reinvent the wheel. You can simply create another server and just pick it up. That is if you didn't do any of the altering or something for the search API server, but kind of use it plainly. But if you did the altering, then you'll need to modify your alters for the Solr. Other than that, it's kind of like switching the handle, and that's it. Next, let's see if there is something here. No, I don't see any questions here. Okay, so thanks everyone, and I hope you enjoyed it. It didn't bore you much. So thanks, bye.